I hated recruiters. I was not neutral. I didn't dislike them. I hated them. We basically demand a high level of commitment with the hiring authority. And that's generally not HR, because HR doesn't feel the pain as much as, for example, that sales director who has a wounded territory because such and so drug up 3 months ago and he's losing customers. We've been on death's doorstep for 40 years, right? The internet, job boards, AI, recruiting is dead.
Welcome back to Talent Hunters, powered by MRI Network, where each week we talk with the world's top talent strategists and executive recruiters. If you want to build talented teams that drive your company to big goals and big growth, then this podcast is for you. And now, let's join the conversation with today's episode of Talent Hunters.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Vince Holt, and I'm the host of Talent Hunters. Today, it is my privilege to bring Chris Yee, founder of Zenith Search Partners, located in Friendswood, Texas. I've known Chris for about 9 years, and it was just at the time he was starting his business. And I am very, very honored and proud to say that Chris's firm is ranked in the top 50 in the world today for 2024. Congratulations and welcome, Chris.
Thank you. And it's always great to see you, my friend. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So, Chris, I'm excited because I'd like you to just give us a Reader's Digest version of what got you where you are today in both prior to you starting here and you coming into the business.
Excellent. All right. Well, I started my franchise at the young age of 49 years old. I had never owned a business. I had always worked for multi-billion-dollar firms in the chemical space, very early in my career in the energy space, but still that's upstream chemicals. So I've always worked for the man, right? And during my time in the chemical space, the last 20 years of my career in the chemical space, I hated recruiters. I was not neutral. I didn't dislike them. I hated them. And I hated them because virtually all of them didn't know about my business, didn't know about me as a candidate or a hiring manager. They just didn't know, and they just didn't know our business, the chemical business. So I frankly, Vince, I thought the bar was kind of low. I thought even if I was an average recruiter or maybe even below average recruiter, I could feed my family moderately in this space. I had never been in HR. I had never been in talent management. I'd been an engineer, worked in finance and procurement, but ended the last 15 years of my career in sales and commercial management. But again, never HR, always hated HR, always pretty much cursed them out, every chance I got, so I came here to be the recruiter, and I wanted to start this company to be a recruiter that I had never experienced, quote, on the other side, unquote. That's all.
I love that.
That was my business plan.
I love that. So today, 9 years later, I mean, you've experienced the highs, the lows, COVID.
I was going to say, we had a pandemic some time ago, I think.
and you started at the time, obviously, we had a housing or stock market crash or something. So you've been through some trials and tribulations. But now I want to know, what makes your organization different than the other recruiting people that you used to hate?
We have a story, right? Our story is why you, Mr. Chemical Professional, Mrs. Chemical Hiring Manager, Mrs. Candidate in the chemical space who are looking for, maybe actively or passively looking for a new opportunity, why should you team with us versus the other guy? The other guy could be ZipRecruiter. The other guy could be Google Jobs or Indeed, right? But why would you use us? Why would you even want to talk to somebody like me? Because I'm way more expensive than the free, Indeed ad that you could put out there and plaster the earth with. I'm a little more than that, right? And the answer is you use us because of our passion for the industry and for what we've learned over our time as recruiters in this industry. Now, I personally can leverage time working in the industry, but we have some folks in our company, Vince, that have never practiced in the chemical industry. They are straight recruiters, where I'm not a recruiter. I'm a chemical guy who masquerades as a recruiter, right? And for the last 9 years, I've got this imposter syndrome. What am I doing here? I'm not sure, right? But we lean into the fact that we understand their business. We understand their needs. We understand their frustrations as an underappreciated, undercompensated, underutilized employee. We understand that because I have been there and I can relate to that. And all too often in our space, it's a gargantuan industry, but I find myself almost always having maximum 3 to 4 degrees of separation with the people I speak with. Either they know somebody I know somebody they know, or my business, my company, when I was working, in the industry, my company was working with their company, or my company supplied their company, or my company, bought chemistry from their company. So things like that. So having that connection is huge. Does that make sense, Vince?
Yeah, it does. And it leads me down a path. Briefly, what was it that you hated about recruiters when you were actually working in the industry firsthand?
Brother, how long do we have on this podcast? What, 3-5 hours? Because I could get a pizza and we could stay here all night.
But I know you can encapsulate it.
We could just have a virtual pizza. No. Really, being ignorant is certainly not a sin, because the Lord knows that I'm ignorant about many, many things. But it's different to be closed-minded and willfully ignorant about something and then purport yourself to know something, whether it's know the search that you're working for or know the company that you are representing. And it's very quick. And we're told this by the candidates we work with today, as well as the hiring firms we serve today. Y'all are different. And I always ask, different in a good way or different in a bad way? And they said, no, y'all are different in that you get us. You understand us. So what I would say differentiates us is really knowing and having an open and growth mindset to where it's like, look, if I don't know your business, I'm going to find out. If I don't know who and what you are in your current employer, even if you're a potential candidate, I'm going to find out. I've got this thing called Google. It's pretty cool. It's fairly new. I can find out about who and what you are, at least enough to be conversant, right? Yeah. I don't know how, I just need to tell time. I don't need to know how the watch is made, right? And what I found when I was in industry, I would ask, oh, you're approaching me for a job, Mr. Recruiter or Mrs. Recruiter. That's great. Tell me, what is this? How does this company you represent, how does it position itself in the market? What does it sell? To whom does it sell? Why is this job open? And all, how is the variable compensation calculated, right? It's like, okay, I know the base is 100%. Great. You have a 20% bonus. That's great. How's that calculated? And what's the average payout of that bonus over the last 5 years? Just because you have a target 20%, if you only pay 4% a year, I would want to know both those numbers. And all too often I got these blank stares. And I said, okay, you're representing the ABC company. Why do people buy from ABC? And it's funny because oftentimes I knew the ABC and I knew the answer, but I would ask the recruiter just to see what he knows or what she knows. And I'd get that classic deer in the headlight looks,
Mm-hmm.
that I give to my wife all the time, frankly. But yes, so I give her that,
So let me interrupt you here just a second, because you just gave a great example of probably, we'll say 75% of it's a made up percentage, 75% of the recruiting world. But yes, the industry. You have people working with you that didn't know the industry, that have been very, very successful for you in the industry. So what did you do for those people to combat that initial feeling that you felt from the wannabe recruiters?
Oh, Vince, that is a great question. And that is a challenge that is ongoing every day. Because you bring in a new recruiter and he or she says, how do you spell chemistry? Is it with a K or a C? It's like, well, depends on what part, it depends on what part of Texas you're from.
That's right.
And I'm from Houston. Okay. So, hey, I can't, so what we do is we go, okay, this is a professional association to which we belong. And we belong to several. And even those that we don't belong to, for whatever reason, this is the industry association. Go to the industry association and find out what type of introductory material is on that website. For example, the American Chemistry Council. It is not, it is a group of companies that are in the chemical space. We'll find out about chemicals from the American Chemical Council, right? Or the Association of Chemical Distributors. There's another one, right? So go find out how this chemical value chain works. And then me, as the owner, what I'll do is when I take a search on for a company, and it's like, okay, company ABC wants to hire a salesperson. Well, I know I speak to the hiring manager of company ABC and I get the specifications for what he or she needs. I will sit down with that recruiter. I will give that recruiter websites and information to say, okay, this company sells chemistry ABC. What is chemistry ABC? Who uses chemistry ABC? What does this company do to market ABC? What is this company's position in the ABC market? I provide that information the best I can to my recruiters before they make a single call, before they make a single LinkedIn reach out or a text or whatever, right? Before they post the job on LinkedIn, right? Or our website, right? They will have some information from me in a Word file, in a file to which they can refer about how to transfer what's in between my two ears, frankly, to them. It's a challenge. Obviously, we're not perfect at it because you can't download all the garbage in my head to to a Microsoft Word document. But it's what we do. And it's a way to shortcut and have them represent themselves as, yeah, I'm a recruiter who at least knows a little about your business. Does that answer your question, Vince? I mean,
yeah,
it's not
really
perfect. It's not perfect. I'd love to hear of other folks, who've got a better way, because I steal those ways in a heartbeat. But yeah.
Every good recruiter plagiarizes everything you have to say.
Absolutely. It's like, man, I use scripts that you used when you learned as a rookie.
Exactly.
You're just coming off the motorcycle racetrack. Yeah, I know about that, brother. That's probably for another podcast. But yeah, I use probably that same script that you used, say, a couple of years ago.
Hey, those scripts were written in 1964, and I trained them to my people and on and on. So they haven't changed a bit. You're absolutely right. So in your website, you comment on your consultative approach. Tell us what you mean by that consultative approach.
We're here to serve. The bottom line of all of our invoices, it's literally the bottom line. It's in the largest font and the boldest font, and it's actually, there's a box around it. It says, thank you for the opportunity to serve you. So everything we do at my firm, I really try to keep that bottom line of my invoice in mind. I am here to serve others. So serving them means not just being a headhunter who takes a job order / job description and goes out and makes 500 phone calls. And then throws 50 resumes at a hiring manager. It's the spaghetti way, right? Vince, you and I have heard it. You throw 50 resumes at a hiring manager, and you hope and pray that 5 or 7 or 3 will stick. We don't do it that way. We basically demand a high level of commitment with the hiring authority. And that's generally not HR, because HR doesn't feel the pain as much as, for example, that sales director who has a wounded territory because such and so drug up 3 months ago and he's losing customers, in that region. HR knows of the pain, but only from a secondhand perspective. And we demand basically to speak with that sales director, that sales manager, or that sales supervisor to find out what he or she is really looking for. And that's where we can consult with them. And we actually can say, well, look, have you considered looking under this particular rock? For example, if you're in the chemical distribution market, because I mentioned chemical distribution, then we might ask you, hey, have you considered looking at folks who are in the chemical manufacturing space, who are not distributors, but they're manufacturers, but they serve the same end customers as you do. For example, they serve people who make shampoo and soaps, right? Well, they sell chemistry to those same end users, but they have a different view of the market, and they might sell to a different flavor of customer, if you will. Have you considered that? And we talk through the pluses and minuses of that. And we really challenge, like, oh, you don't want to hire somebody from that type of company. Tell me why. Tell me why. And we really try to help them really hone their strategy, because we're here to serve them and to execute their strategy. But all too often, sometimes we find that our insight helps them hone their strategy. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Now let me flip a piece of paper. Okay. I loved your comment, we demand from our hiring authorities or companies that we work with. Briefly, what do you demand from your candidates?
Great question. We want to share expectations. Like, okay. And as an engineer, I've been accused and I'm guilty of being very, very sequential, being very, very married almost to a fault to procedures, even when sometimes they don't make sense. My own team tells me that. It's like, you're going to die on the ship. It's like, yeah, no. So we want people to know what we expect and why. For example, oh, Vince, you have a non-compete and the company I'm representing is in the same space as you, and the company I'm representing would be very curious to know the details of your non-compete, because that will level up or level down their interest in you. And Vince, you might say, well, I never provide my non-compete to anybody, especially not a dumb recruiter like you, Chris. I'm not offended. It's like, okay, I understand, Vince, and I appreciate that, right? Thank you for your transparency. I do appreciate that. But let me tell you why the firm I serve at some point is going to need that. And I'll explain to them. And it's like, look, if you choose not to provide your non-compete, that is your right. But I don't see your candidacy progressing with this firm very far without it. Now, it's your choice. I mean, I serve you, Vince, as a recruiter, and you're a potential candidate. But I can't serve you to the fullest extent I think I could, because, and you might be missing out on a wonderful opportunity. Maybe you might be missing out on a wonderful opportunity that could change the trajectory of your family and your professional career. Maybe, but we'll never get there, Vince. If you just steadfastly refuse to provide this, then I'm afraid I'm just going to have to drop you. Ultimately, I'm so sorry, but I'm afraid you're choosing to drop yourself out of this process. Again, it's your choice, but I basically demand that in order for you, if you want to continue, then you got to provide me that PDF.
Let me throw something else at you, though, that might put another bullet in your gun, okay? What you're doing with that candidate is, you got to remember, you want to protect their confidentiality.
Absolutely.
The worst thing you could do for that candidate that stands on his principle of not sharing, right, is put him through an interview process, have the company suddenly demand this, and him say no means he's gone through a process that could possibly expose him looking outside of his company, knowing full well by the end of it, he's going to turn it down. So in short, what I'm saying is, my job is to protect your confidentiality, Chris, and putting you through a process that this company is going to want to understand if they can even hire you, or if you can even go to work for them, okay? You're not going to want to go through that process if you don't want to hand over. So it's the same thing you're talking about, but people usually truly, when it becomes first person exposure, they hear what you're saying because it's about them. So good for you. I love that. I love that. I really do.
And we oftentimes talk of it, the drama. I said, Vince, imagine the drama. You're feeling so excited about this company. It's like, oh my goodness, I finally get to eat steak instead of hamburger, and it's really good. I love it. And the company's excited about you. It's like, oh my goodness, Vince is going to propel us from, AA ball to the major leagues and maybe even the All-Stars. I mean, Vince he is the best thing since sliced bread. And then 6 weeks into the process, when the expectations are so high, you reach this wall that you crash into and you're done. I said, imagine the drama for you. Imagine the emotional investment that you've made, not to even mention your time, which is certainly very valuable, but imagine the emotional and chronological investments you've made. Wouldn't it be better just to avoid all that? I think it might be. Again, Vince, we always try to leave it up to you. We're not here to demand anything. We're just here to give you the potential benefits of your changing your position.
It's good.
And honestly, Vince, sometimes it works. And I'll be honest, sometimes they said, Chris, thanks, but no thanks. I said, okay. We're not like, hey, let us keep your resume. We'll keep looking on your behalf. We're your talent agent out here in the field. Just think of us as your little search bot. We're your real live search bot, Vince. And we know that the ABC isn't right for you, nor you for them. Hey, we'll continue to look for company XYZ, right? We'll look for another firm. And that's how we end it. And again, it's cool.
Perfect.
It's cool.
So right now, this country is in a trilemma. Work from home, hybrid, demand in the office. How's that affecting your business today, Chris?
Oh, golly. Yes, because we do, for sales folks, typically they're usually home office based. I was home office based for 8 or 9 years, right? And I ended my career, as a home office based employee, right? So that was cool, right? But we serve a lot of companies and a lot of roles like inside sales rep, customer service, supply chain / logistics / materials movement, materials management, right? So operations type folks, import export folks, where, lab personnel, formulators who, well, if you formulate, you probably need a lab, and you probably don't have a lab in your garage, at least not worth that much money. So you probably need to come to the lab, right? And it's a challenge because we have some people that say, wait a minute. I'm a customer service rep, but I haven't worked in an office. I haven't worn anything but shorts for the last 4 years. Okay. So yeah, it's a challenge. Yes, it is a challenge. Just like I'm sure it is for everybody else that graces this chair in front of you, Mr. Vince.
What are you dealing with in solution to help companies solve that problem?
Most of the time, it's asking why. Because if we understand the why, if the what is, you have to be in the office, let's go extreme. You have to be in the office 5 days a week. If that's the what. Okay, that's cool. Why? Mr. Hiring Director, Mrs. Hiring Manager, why? I understand the what, just tell me the why. Because oftentimes people will accept the why and say, all right, if that's why, and this is good for my career, then I'll do it. I'll buy pants for the first time. I'll buy a pair of slacks for the first time in 4 years. I'm being only partially facetious.
Exactly.
You know how it is, Vince. You know how it is. So firsthand. So, for example, we have a firm that we serve that is a multinational firm, but is very small. And it is a multi-million-dollar, very small firm, well under 50 people at this firm. And the owner of that firm says, I require certain people, certain titles, certain roles to be in this office. I said, great. Why? And the owner says, well, it's because we have found that the ad hoc dialogue that happens in the kitchen, that happens around the proverbial water cooler. We don't have one, but the proverbial water cooler dialogue is so organic and so synergistic compared to Yahoo Messenger, Slack, Teams, which, compared to, video meeting this, video meeting that. He said, for these types of mission critical positions, we need them here, and that's why. He goes, frankly, we're not big enough, and it's so dynamic at our company right now. We have determined, parentheses, him as the owner, I have determined, that this is the way we're going to operate. And Chris, if your candidate can't see the why and can't operate under these conditions, then even if that candidate is perfect in all respects, we cannot, at this moment, we choose not to let that person in our door. I have gone to market with that message for this particular hiring firm. Sometimes the candidate says, I get it. I understand. I'd be down for that. May I hear more? And some of them said, no, not for me. Just not for me. Well, we write it down in our PC Recruiter 5-point. If you remember what those are, we write that down in our 5-point, must be remote, WFH, work from home, blah, 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 right? And we write that down. It's like, okay, thank you, Mrs. Candidate. We appreciate that, but this role isn't for you. So finding the why and understanding the why, and then you ask the candidate, why are you so adverse to doing something you did every day 10 years ago? Help me understand why. Because what we'll do sometimes is we'll go back to the owner of that firm, say, look, Vince is the perfect candidate. And this is why Vince is perfect. He's got A, B, C, D, blah, blah, blah. He's best thing since sliced bread, blah, blah, blah. He'll propel your company. He's be great, right? But he chooses to only work in your office 3 days a week versus 5 because. Do you want to engage with Vince? Sometimes that answer is yes, and sometimes the answer is no. So finding out the what and the why, and then seeing what type of give is on either side is really the only thing we can do. Knowing that some people will basically entrench themselves in a position and not move. And you just got to recognize that, right, Vince? It's America in 2024, right? I mean, what do you want, right?
Well put. Well put. So I got one final question.
Anything,
because
sir.
Everything I've known about you is you are committed. You are committed to make this thing work. You've been that way since the day I met you. What does Chris Yee do to let go? How do you clean your head?
Well, when you say I'm committed, my wife would probably amend that statement saying I should be committed to an institution. But how I clear my head, it's very difficult because, as you know, Mr. Vince Holt, this can be all encompassing. This can be 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Sundays are meant for internet research, right? Go to church and then go work for 10 hours. Yeah, I get that. So what I do is I really try to obey the part of the Bible that says I should have a Sabbath, a day of rest. And in that day, I really try to unplug. Perfect? No. Sometimes horribly imperfect? Yes. I've been in this literal office at literally all hours of the day and night, and probably, because we work overseas sometimes too, right? It's like, great, I got a call with China. Great, I got a call with Japan. That means I'm here when? 3 a.m, no problem, right? Key still works, so But I try to unplug by literally giving myself a Sabbath day, a day of rest, from the good book. That's what I try. And I try to take my mind off of that and just for a little while, be a dad, be a husband, do other things like, be involved with other organizations like a church or something, so like my church, things like that. Again, Vince, not probably like you, varying level of success with that endeavor.
Totally understand. So, Chris, do you have a question for me?
Yes. I spoke to you and two other owners when I was considering making the plunge to be a franchise of management recruiters back then, right? There's, no HQI back then, back in the dark ages, if you will. And you told me something that I didn't fully understand. You said, Chris, your only job is to get what we at MRI call a send out. And it's basically a interview or a dialogue or an interaction between a hiring firm and a candidate/potential candidate. That's your only job. And when all else fails, strip everything away and just start with that. That was in the dark ages, 2015, when the world was young. And my question to you is, now that we're in the enlightened age of almost 2025, has that advice changed? If you were to talk to a brand new potential owner this afternoon, would you tell her or him the same thing you told me in late 2015?
Thank you for asking that question. Because that was my instruction to me when I started 39 years ago.
Legacy continues.
And everything that has transpired in nearly 40 years, the fax machine, the computers, technology, everything has provided the so-called shortcut to put us out of business. The reality of it is, my job breaks down into really three disciplines. Introduce two people, facilitate a process, and close a deal. That doesn't mean it's a hire. Close the transaction. So to answer your question, no, the message hasn't changed. Our job is to do what we control, not what. Don't overthink the process. Facilitate it. If they want to walk away, walk away. If they're walking away on knowledgeable things, support that 100%. If there's a fallacy in their thinking, I'm going to surface the fallacy and help them decide, do they want to or not move forward. But everything that I do and coach and train people to do is focus on what you control. And the only thing you control is setting two people up to talk, because you control getting the information from the company, you control getting the information from the candidate, and you control setting up the interview if there's a mutual interest. If there is, now my job is to facilitate the process, because I don't make decisions. Does that help answer your question?
No, that's great. It's amazing that what Mr. Schoenberg taught you, right? Back in the real dark ages, not just the dark ages, like the dark ages, it's amazing how these tools, and they are a myriad of tools, like there are more tools literally than me with my public school education can keep up for engagement, social media, reaching out to people. I'm not an expert. I'm an old dummy when it comes to that. But they just facilitate these simple things that you talked about. You didn't say telephone, cell phone, text. You didn't say that. You said facilitate an interaction, facilitate a dialogue, draw things to a close, draw processes to an end, which could be somebody walks away from you, somebody walks away from them, whatever, or somebody gets together. It doesn't matter. Just draw it to a close. Technology is merely a tool that has allowed us to do that on a much larger scale, much faster scale. There's no argument, right? Rather than make one phone call, you can set up a blast and email 1,000 people, in one keystroke. I get that, right? But at the end of the day, this business is still the same as it was in the dark ages in the mid 60s.
Okay. True story.
Which is amazing. And I guess it leads to the answer of, will executive recruiters still be around? Because if you think about it, we've been on death's doorstep for 40 years, right? The internet, job boards, AI, recruiting is dead, right? We've heard that I'm sure you've heard it literally all your life, right? Well, what you said would suggest that maybe it's not on death's doorstep.
Never has.
Maybe there's a future for this industry.
Never has been on death's doorstep.
Regardless of what is written, right, and what is said. Because, look, you've heard those headlines back I heard them back in the 80s. Headhunters are going to go the way of the buggy whip, right? Because you don't need them anymore, because we've got this internet, we've got these multiple platforms. You got these companies being able to recruit on their own, because go to, xyzcompany.com and they don't need you. Well, maybe they do.
Maybe they do. Chris, with that, we got to bring this to a close. I want to thank you so very, very much for taking the time out of your busy day and spending it with me. I love talking to you about this business. I really do. Thank you.
Always, Vince. Thank you so much. I'm honored to have you here. It's always good to see you. It's always good to see you. It's good to see you're doing well. Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.